you've knocked down the barriers that they had, those like objections, you've built up that value, you've built that trust, and it's kind of a no-brainer for them to kind of part with that hard-earned cash and buy your product.
I'm interested because you mentioned that it is an art and a science, and part of the science is, of course, to convert people. But we're also, before that stage on a website, trying to compel people to continue on the website and stay with you and consider adding to cart and going through that process. So going back to the website copy that we're creating, how does the copy differ on different pages? So like a home page compared to a product page, how would you differ the type of copy that you write?
Great question. I think that, first of all, while we want to focus on how it differs, I'd like to say, first of all, that you want to make sure there's consistency throughout those pages and a flow. So while each page type kind of plays a role, and usually kind of a slightly different role, the first thing to do when sort of mapping out your website, like building an information architecture, we call it an IA, kind of the thinking before the writing, is to, make sure that you're looking at that flow and thinking about how a visitor would flow from page to page, where you want to move them to and why. And back to tone of voice, there should be consistency in voice across those pages. But saying that, I guess we can dive into some specific pages. So should we start with the home page?
Yeah, as if we're a customer, I guess.
There you go, your shop window. I'd say that the home page is an interesting one, an important piece of the puzzle. First of all, it's usually the page that most traffic is driven to, other than, let's say, specific landing pages for kind of PPC traffic, and we can go into those in a moment. But as your shop window, and as that often it's the first touch point, or maybe not the first, but they've been driven by an ad or some kind of piece of content. It's perhaps the first touch point where you're there to kind of really sell yourself, let's say. The first thing to think about is the kind of real estate at the top of the screen, above the fold, which is a bit of an old school term, but it's still important. It's that bit that the visitor will see when they land on your site. And we like to say in copywriting that you've got around 6 seconds to grip your visitor. It's kind of the make or break moment. And you can look at sort of stats again, back to like, I obviously like the history of copywriting, an old school newspaper ad. It's very similar when looking at a headline of an old newspaper kind of article. That's the most important part, that first, essentially value proposition headline that you want to weave into your homepage. And I say value proposition, I should add the word unique. Really what we're trying to achieve there is to take your unique value proposition and express it in a few sentences. An instant clarity headline. So clarity is key, right? You don't want to get so creative that in those 6 seconds, your visitor doesn't know what it is you sell, what's the value you can offer them, why they're there, should they continue reading. And then usually like a subheader or a little paragraph there, which kind of reinforces some of those USPs and gives you a bit more copy to kind of to reinforce that. So that's kind of a key ingredient in a homepage, is making sure that you grip them in the first place with that instant clarity header and subheader. Then a lot of the rest of your homepage it is dedicated to often kind of teasing other areas of the site, because naturally they can go into more detail on other pages. So usually it's subheaders, paragraphs that will tease the about page, that will tease like the product pages. And what I'd say that's really important also for a homepage, and I'd say again, this is very important for specific landing pages, is that your subheaders shouldn't just tease the paragraph underneath them, right? That's very common for brands to kind of say, why us, or our products, and then there's a paragraph there. The reason why, you need to do more than that is because lots of people skim and scan. A very common way for people to sort of engage with a website is by skimming and scanning. And it's a very common mistake for marketers and even copywriters to kind of assume that they're reading every single word because you've poured your heart into it. You've written all these words, so surely they're going to be reading every word in the exact order that you want them to. The reality is they don't. They kind of land on a website. As I said, they've got 20 other tabs open and they often whip through it. So a great tip is to make sure on your homepage, your subheaders, within 5 seconds of skimming down that page, your subheaders kind of tell the story and express your USPs, your unique selling points, just by themselves without them having to read that body copy within each section. So again, a homepage has to do so much because you kind of want in 5-10 seconds, if someone just reading, the main header and subheader, then whipping through the subheaders to get a feel, to get a gist for what it is you can do for them, why you're different, what's the unique value you can provide to them, and how can you kind of change their life for the better, in a sense. And then, beyond that, you want to kind of tease these other pages and try to nudge them to sort of navigate the site and go to the different areas where you want them to go and where it would help to, build that trust that we mentioned and build on it to a point whereby, they feel like you've knocked down the barriers that they had, those like objections, you've built up that value, you've built that trust, and it's kind of a no-brainer for them to kind of part with that hard-earned cash and buy your product or products.
I love that idea of teasing the next step. And it's like you're not trying to sell the product at that point or even tell your whole story on the homepage. It's about getting people to engage more with your brand, to start searching around. And I love that idea of teasing. A quick point while we're on the subject of the homepage still is creating that unique value proposition. So to give you some context for the type of businesses that we run, we'll enter a niche or an industry that we can tell there are products that we want to enter that are selling already. And when we're early stage in this building an e-commerce business, we might not be 100% sure on what our unique value proposition is, or even what our value proposition is as a business at the very early stage. So how would you go about kind of getting really clear and condensing that right down to a sentence and a subheading? How can you really condense and understand what it is you can offer to your customers?
You're giving me good questions today. I'd say that like when it comes to the value proposition or UVP, unique value proposition, as you've sort of mentioned there, the first step is the thinking, right? The strategy, the strategic side of things, prior to actually kind of bringing that to life with copy. And again, for me, that fits into the sort of brand strategy box, right? That stage, which for us, as I said, is like probably an essential ingredient or essential step prior to kind of bringing it to life. And for us, when it comes to value propositions and unique value propositions, there's an element of having to do competitor analysis, right? Because the likelihood is that you have maybe a brilliant product or products, and maybe they are unique. And I'm sure there's something unique about them, but what is that? How can you figure that out when the likelihood is that there are probably lots of other competitors who are offering similar products, if not, very, very similar. So you need to do competitor analysis to kind of zig while the industry zags, to kind of help you understand what is unique about what you're offering, and then create a value proposition statement. So it's more of a sort of internal document. There are various formulas. We have one. I'm sure you guys have one, where it's you're kind of breaking down, who's your target audience, what it is you're offering them, what are your differentiators, what does that mean for them, something like that, following a formula. And that might be a bit of a longer statement that's more sort of internal that you use to drive all of your marketing efforts. And then what we have to do as copywriters, kind of the hard task of distilling that down into even fewer words. And again, an instant clarity header on a homepage is one of the toughest kind of nuts to crack, so to speak, because much like taglines, right, where sometimes brands come to us and just think, they misunderstand how difficult it is to write a great tagline when you've got 3 to 5 words to really embody, the essence of that brand. When you've got fewer words, it actually takes longer sometimes because it's more difficult. And yeah, how do we do it? I guess it's just drilling down into, like, as I said, the essence of that value proposition statement. Like, what are the things that jump out? What are those core elements, those core words? And also we follow formulas as well. When it comes to writing headlines for a homepage, there's all kinds of formulas out there that have proven to work. So back to the art and the science. Naturally we want to be creative, and but at the same time, there are proven formulas and frameworks that work. So we would usually, if we're writing copy for a client, for example, we'd usually give them a few options for different headlines that maybe take a slightly different approach, but all of which try to embody that value proposition into sort of one sentence and then a subheader or a sort of a mini paragraph after that.
Fantastic. That's the key, isn't it? Trying to distill something down into a punchy 5 or 6 word statement that differentiates you and immediately tell your customers what they're going to get from working with you is the key to it all. And I agree. Making something shorter, although it's less words, takes longer than being less concise. So taking that then to the product page, how about a few best practices for actually the copy that we'd put on the product page?
Product pages, I think, very commonly focus too much, as I said earlier, on features, those specifications, and just that. I think there's a missed opportunity to A, inject those benefits in, B, to inject creativity and personality. Even with some brands, some e-commerce brands, you'll find that personality, that tone of voice is kind of there in the homepage, in the about page. But then when it comes to the product, it's like, oh, we don't need that. Here, let's just show the product. So there's an opportunity to kind of weave that consistent tone of voice into the product pages as well. Something that is very, very powerful. So if this might be my tip of the day, potentially, we call it voice of customer data, so VOC data, so voice of customer language. This is very powerful. Well, let me explain what it is, first of all. By that, I mean the way that your customers are describing your product and describing their pain points and describing their desires and describing how that product changed their life, etc. That is a brilliant thing to gather and to weave into your product pages. So an easy way to do it when you're an e-commerce brand, and we often do this for clients, is go, if you're selling via Amazon, etc., there's loads of comments there. There's all that feedback. That's a gold mine of voice of customer language that you can go through. And there are 2 things we usually look for. On the one hand, it's when a word or a phrase has been used commonly, right? Because then there's something there. It's like, oh, okay, that's the word they're using to describe the product or the pain point or the brand. Because if it's 60% or 50% of people are kind of using that word or similar words, then it would be a great idea to weave that into your product page copy. Also, sometimes you just find a quote that's been so emotively written and beautifully written that as a copywriter, you don't even want to touch it. That can become your product page headline. It's like, wow, that came from the heart, right? We as copywriters are trying to express things in a way that will really resonate with the emotions of our target audience. And what could be better than if it's just come from the horse's mouth, so to speak, And occasionally you'll just find this amazing emotive language and you can weave it in. And in order to also create social proof, which is something that we definitely should talk about, you can create instant social proof by actually just putting it in quotation marks. So that's another little tip. Your product page should have a header as well. Again, there's a missed opportunity if you just write the product name, right? Have have something more exciting. Use those copywriting techniques that we're talking about today. And potentially it could literally be a quote that you've pulled out of a customer review. And by putting in quotation marks, people instantly know that that's not come from you. It's not how you're describing your product. It's how someone like them, another customer, is describing their product. And that's my third point for product pages, other than weaving in voice of customer language and words and phrases, etc. Social proof is absolutely crucial, not just for your product page. It should be, weave it into every page, but possibly more so on that product page where you're really trying to nudge them to purchase a particular product. People, back to trust. We talked about trust at the beginning. It's one of the first things we talked about. People are more likely to trust other customers, other people like them, than they are the brand. Because naturally a brand is going to be saying that their products are great and are the perfect fit for your needs, right? That's what we're going to be doing. We're as a sales and marketing team, that's kind of our job, is to say how great our products are. And you can do it in clever ways, but one of the smartest things you can do is create that social proof by having, customer quotes, feedback, how many stars did it get in wherever, Google, etc. And just litter it with testimonials, essentially. And like I said, they can even be woven into the copy itself.